The morning sun spilled across the quiet suburban streets of Cedar Ridge, Virginia, as if to suggest that evil couldn't possibly live here. White picket fences lined manicured lawns, and neighbors waved from their driveways, sipping coffee, walking dogs, planning barbecues. But behind the closed door of 128 Rosewood Lane, beneath the soft hum of a dishwasher and the faint scent of cinnamon candles, a sinister secret festered. One that would shatter this picture-perfect neighborhood and unravel the truth behind a man named Charles Whitmore. Charles was the kind of man people trusted without question. He wore tailored suits, drove a modest Tesla, and served on the HOA board with a quiet charm that made him seem above suspicion. He was a respected real estate agent, a loving husband to his wife, Melissa, and a doting father to their 2 children. He coached Little League, volunteered at the local shelter, and always knew just the right thing to say. But none of it was real. The deception began long before Cedar Ridge, before the family photos and PTA meetings, before Melissa's social media posts gushing about her rock, her forever love. Charles had carefully constructed the lie, layer by layer, detail by detail, like a master architect building a home with rotted wood and painted facades. What no one knew, not Melissa, not the neighbors, not even his closest friends, was that Charles wasn't his real name. His past had been buried in a shallow grave in New Hampshire under a different name with a very different family. Melissa started noticing the cracks first. Late nights at the office turned into weekend trips he couldn't quite explain. Bank statements showed strange withdrawals. His temper, once hidden behind a polished exterior, began to slip through in small, jagged moments. A slammed door, a condescending remark, an icy silence that lasted days. Still, she stayed. She rationalized. She believed, until the night she didn't. It was a Thursday when the truth began to bleed through. Melissa had found a hidden folder on Charles's laptop, a single file labeled Monarch. Inside were photos of another woman, another child, a birth certificate, a death certificate, a restraining order. The woman's name was Emily Parker, the child, a boy named Noah, both from a town 2 states away, both gone. Melissa's blood ran cold as she scrolled. The woman looked happy, then scared, then, in the last photo, bruised and hollow-eyed. The timestamp was just months before Charles moved to Cedar Ridge. That night, Melissa didn't sleep. She stared at Charles as he snored beside her, his face so peaceful, so ordinary. She thought about waking the kids and running. But where would she go? And what if he found them? Instead, she played the game. She kissed him in the morning. She made pancakes. She smiled at the neighbors. And she went to the police. Detective Laura Grayson had seen plenty of liars in her career, but there was something about Charles that made her skin crawl. The evidence Melissa provided was enough to open an investigation, but not enough to make an arrest. They needed more, so Melissa wore a wire. For weeks, she lived in a house of mirrors, pretending everything was fine. She baited Charles gently, carefully, and he responded, paranoid, volatile, slipping into rants about betrayal and loyalty and how they always try to ruin good men. One night, he confessed. I didn't mean to hurt her, he said, swirling whiskey in a glass. Emily, she wouldn't stop. I gave her everything, and she turned on me, just like you will. Melissa's hands shook under the table. I would never do that, she said softly. Charles leaned in, eyes dark. You will. They all do. The next morning, Grayson had what she needed. Charles Whitmore, real name Charles Darren Marks, was arrested at 7:12 a.m., barefoot in his driveway, coffee mug in hand, surrounded by stunned neighbors. The trial was explosive. The prosecution laid out a chilling pattern. A man who reinvented himself every few years, charming women, building families, then vanishing when control slipped through his fingers. Emily Parker had filed a restraining order after discovering Charles's criminal record in another state: fraud, assault, identity theft. A week later, she was found dead in her bathtub. The death had been ruled accidental, but new evidence suggested otherwise. Melissa's testimony was the final nail. The courtroom hung on every word as she described her descent into fear, the manipulation, the isolation, the calculated charm that turned into a cage. The recording played like a horror film. Some jurors cried. Others couldn't look away. Charles showed no emotion. When the guilty verdict was read, the gallery erupted. Life in prison without parole. Justice, it seemed, had been served. But evil doesn't die quietly. 6 months later, Melissa received a letter. No return address. Inside, a single photograph, her children walking home from school. On the back, in neat handwriting, "I told you they always turn. See." The FBI launched an immediate investigation, but the trail was cold. Charles hadn't escaped. He was still locked up in solitary. No phone access, no visitors. So how had the photo been taken? Who had sent it? That night, Melissa sat by the window, clutching a knife, watching shadows crawl across her lawn. The wind whispered through the trees like a voice she couldn't place. Sleep never came. Somewhere, in some quiet room, someone else was watching. And Charles? He smiled in his cell, humming to himself as if nothing had ever gone wrong. The letter changed everything. For 6 months, Melissa Whitmore had been learning how to breathe again, learning how to be a mother, not a hostage, how to trust in quiet moments, and not jump every time the door creaked or the wind shifted. Therapy had helped. The kids were smiling again. Life was beginning to resemble normal. And then came the photograph. Her children walking home from school, backpacks bouncing, smiles wide, captured from a distance through what looked like a telephoto lens. Too crisp, too close, too personal. And the message on the back, "I told you they always turn. See." Charles was locked away in Virginia State Penitentiary. No parole, no visitors, no communication. But someone was working for him. Or worse, someone was continuing his work. The FBI assigned a task force immediately. The letter was scanned, dusted, analyzed. No fingerprints, no DNA, no matches to any known associates. Melissa and the kids were placed in protective custody, relocated under new names to a remote safe house in western North Carolina. Still, she didn't sleep. Detective Laura Grayson, who had led the original investigation into Charles, was furious. "He's orchestrating this from the inside," she told the FBI. "He's a manipulator, not a magician." But Charles wasn't talking. He refused interviews, refused visits, only smirked when Grayson finally got clearance to confront him. "You think you've got it figured out," he said, shackled in a cold concrete room, staring at her like a man who still held all the cards. "But you've only seen the first chapter." Grayson leaned in. "Who's sending those letters?" He chuckled. "Do you believe in legacy, detective?" She slammed her file shut. "I believe in karma." But karma was late to the party. 2 weeks into witness protection, the safe house's landline rang. No one had that number, not even Melissa's lawyer. It rang exactly 3 times, then stopped. An hour later, a package arrived at the front door. No postage, just a brown box with one item inside. A snow globe. Inside the glass dome, a replica of the Cedar Ridge neighborhood. Their old house, their street sign. Tiny figures inside, one resembling Melissa, another a man holding a shovel. Melissa dropped it. FBI agents swept the property. No footprints, no security breaches. Cameras caught nothing. Whoever delivered the package had slipped through like a ghost. They were moved again, this time under 24-hour armed guard. And still, it wasn't enough. 3 nights later, a guard was found unconscious outside the house, his weapon missing. No signs of forced entry. But inside, Melissa found something on her pillow, a Polaroid, her children sleeping in their beds. On the back, "They're safest with me." That's when Grayson realized something chilling. This wasn't just a vendetta. It wasn't revenge. It was recruitment. She dug deeper into Charles's background, into the towns he'd lived, the aliases he'd used. She found patterns, disappearances, unsolved deaths, but also followers, women who refused to testify, men who called him misunderstood, Online forums with encrypted threads praising Charles's clarity and philosophy of control. He wasn't working alone. He never had. Charles had built a cult. Melissa, now going by the alias Sarah Jensen, was on the verge of breaking. Her children, Sam and Lily, saw it in her eyes, the tremor in her voice, the locked doors and drawn curtains and whispered conversations behind walls. She tried to protect them from the truth, but fear seeps into everything. It lingers like smoke. That's when the boy arrived. 15 years old, curly hair, eyes too old for his face. He showed up at the FBI's Charlotte field office, drenched from rain, shivering, holding a notebook wrapped in plastic. "My name is Noah Parker," he said, "and Charles is my father." Detective Grayson stared at the boy like a ghost had walked in. Noah Parker was supposed to be dead. His mother, Emily, was found drowned in her bathtub 7 years ago. A tragic accident until Charles's confession. Noah had vanished shortly after. Everyone assumed he'd been taken or killed, but he'd survived. Hidden by an aunt in Oregon, moved from place to place, protected in silence, until he ran, until the letters started showing up there too, until he couldn't stay quiet anymore. The notebook he brought changed everything. Inside were drawings, notes, maps, letters Charles had written, never mailed, collected and copied by Noah over the years. They spoke of the plan, of Phase 2, of Melissa as the sacrifice that unlocks the next gate. Grayson's blood turned to ice. "This isn't about getting to her," she whispered. "It's about using her." They moved Melissa and her children again, this time to a secure underground compound outside Quantico. No windows, no addresses, no access to the outside world. But fear follows you, and the enemy was already inside. 2 days after their arrival, Lily went missing. Her bed untouched. No signs of struggle. The guards had seen nothing. Surveillance showed her walking down the hall alone, opening a door that should have been locked, and vanishing into darkness. Melissa screamed until her throat bled. Noah, who had been sleeping in a nearby room, found something under his mattress. A page torn from one of Charles's notebooks. A single sentence scrawled in red ink. "The blood opens the gate." Grayson's team descended into the compound's service tunnels. Miles of concrete and steel beneath the surface. They found a door left ajar. A single flashlight still flickering. And one more thing. A child's shoe. Melissa collapsed. And Charles? He was still smiling. When the prison warden confronted him with the news, Charles only tilted his head. "She's the key," he said, "not the target." "What does that mean?" the warden asked. Charles leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Some people are meant to die for something. Others are meant to be reborn by it." Then he whispered something else, something that made the warden go pale. He said, "She's with her brother now." The warden stammered, "You don't have a son." Charles raised one eyebrow. "Don't I?" The tunnels beneath the Quantico safe house smelled of metal, mildew, and something far worse. Betrayal. Lily Whitmore was gone. One moment asleep in the most secure facility on the East Coast, and the next vanished into shadow, lured into darkness by someone who knew exactly how to breach the impenetrable. Melissa, now hollow-eyed and trembling, sat in a steel interrogation room, rocking back and forth, whispering her daughter's name. Sam, her son, sat silently beside her. The 10-year-old hadn't spoken since Lily disappeared. He just stared at the wall, as if willing it to give her back. Noah Parker paced outside the room, fists clenched. His chest burned with guilt. "This is my fault," he muttered. "He's using her the way he used me, to punish, to finish whatever he thinks this story is." Detective Laura Grayson didn't disagree. She stood at the edge of collapse herself, bone-tired, furious, and carrying a single focus. End this. End Charles. End his madness. But time was slipping. If Lily wasn't found soon, she wouldn't be found at all. And then the break came from a janitor. 2 weeks earlier, a new contractor had been cleared for maintenance work inside the safe house. Jonathan Reeds. Quiet, punctual, clean background. But that was the problem. His record was too clean, fabricated. The FBI raided his listed address. Inside, they found something chilling. A shrine. Photos of Charles. Newspaper clippings. Handwritten letters that hadn't been released to the public. Only one person could have passed them on. Charles himself. Jonathan Reed's real name, Daniel Mercer, had been a patient in a psychiatric facility in Illinois 5 years earlier. During a mandatory group therapy session, Charles had been brought in under one of his aliases. That's where they met, where the seed was planted, where Daniel became his first disciple. The cameras in the tunnel showed Daniel leading Lily by the hand. Calm, smiling. Lily looked hypnotized. "I think he's drugging them," Noah said, staring at the footage. "Charles used to do that to Emily. He said it made her more pliable, more obedient." Melissa looked up from the footage, her voice razor-thin. "Then she's not scared. She's not screaming. She's just waiting." They finally tracked Daniel's car, abandoned outside a crumbling church 40 miles from the facility, St. Cecilia's. It had been condemned for years. No power, no records of recent activity. But when they approached, the candles inside flickered. Grayson led the raid herself. 12 agents in tactical gear, rifles ready, hearts pounding. Melissa had begged to come, but she was kept behind. She'd already lost one child. They weren't risking her life too. The door creaked open. Inside the church, dozens of lit candles lined the pews. A low hum vibrated through the room. A recording, playing on repeat. Charles's voice, reciting scripture twisted with his own doctrine of control, submission, transformation. In the center of the altar, surrounded by crude symbols drawn in chalk, stood Lily, eyes wide, unblinking. Behind her stood Daniel, wearing a priest's robe, holding a knife. "You're too late," he said calmly. "She's already chosen." Grayson stepped forward, gun raised. "Let her go, Daniel." Daniel smiled. "I'm not her captor. I'm her shepherd." Grayson fired. One shot straight through the shoulder. He dropped the knife and crumpled to the floor, shrieking in pain. Agents rushed Lily, wrapping her in a thermal blanket. Her pupils were dilated. She mumbled incoherently about the gate, the red room, and the voice inside the mirror. She was alive, but not untouched. Back at the facility, doctors worked to purge whatever cocktail had been forced into her bloodstream. Melissa sat at her bedside every second, whispering lullabies through tears. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Daniel, under sedation and restraints, finally broke. He confessed everything. How Charles had communicated through smuggled letters, encoded Bible verses, drawings hidden inside library books. How Charles believed Lily was the new vessel, the child born of betrayal, whose sacrifice would complete the legacy. "He thinks he's God," Daniel muttered. "He thinks death is just a transformation, that if she dies by his command, she lives forever." Grayson didn't wait for more. She walked into Charles's cell alone. No tape recorders, no backup. Charles looked up and grinned. "How's my girl?" Grayson slammed a photo on the table. Lily, unconscious in a hospital bed, tubes in her arms, machines beeping. "She lived," she growled. "Your little prophet failed." Charles leaned back, unbothered. He wasn't meant to succeed, only to begin the rebirth. "Rebirth of what?" Grayson spat. "Your sick little cult?" Charles slowly stood. Even in shackles, he exuded control. "Calm. I will die," he said softly. "Sooner than you think. But I'll still be here. In every whisper, every shadow, every scared little mother who locks her windows at night. Because fear, detective, is forever." That night, Charles was found dead in his cell. No signs of trauma, no poison, no suicide note. Just one thing, a faint smile on his lips, and a paper swan on his pillow. Melissa heard the news and collapsed. Not out of grief, but release, like a curse had finally broken. In the days that followed, Lily began to speak again. Slowly, in fragments. She remembered being told she was chosen, that her mother was a deceiver. But deep down, she said, something felt wrong. It wasn't love, she whispered. It was hunger. Charles was cremated. No one claimed the ashes. And still, the nightmares didn't stop. 1 month later, Melissa received another package. Smaller this time. Inside a child's drawing, it showed 3 stick figures. A woman, a boy, and a girl standing together. Behind them, in the distance, was a tall man with no face. He was watching. On the back, in a child's scrawl, "He's still here. He said he has one more thing to show me." The end.